there's just a team of folks doing the same thing. They watch each boat come in, they swarm it, they get people off. If they need help jumping off the boat, they help them off. So I'm told our studio shot is back up. I want to see if we can go back to Russ. Lisa?
Brandy, it's just incredible images out of Kingwood, and everybody coming out to help these poor folks just trying to get out of that.
I know. We've seen that time and time again in other neighborhoods as well today, Brooks. Water rising in different places. We're going to the hot spot and seeing a lot of the same thing, a lot of boats and a lot of people.
I've got a message of hope, though, for one community, and it's a community that is very affected by this and never has been, and that is the Brazos River Basin. In Richmond, this is just from flood control, brand new information, the Brazos River at Richmond is expected to crest 2 feet below its previous forecast. Nice. Currently at 57.5 is the forecast crest, so it may still flood. There may still be overtopping on the levees in some communities that have never flooded. However, 2 feet lower is better than 2 feet higher, so it's a ray of hope in a situation that continues to deteriorate along those major waterways.
Still looking at overnight Thursday, Friday morning for that crest?
It's hard to say exactly when, but it is looking like we'd see Thursday to maybe Saturday for the crest, and it depends on the body of water. This is the Brazos River at Richmond, the forecast officially Thursday morning. Sometimes these forecasts can be a little bit soft. There's so many things factoring in, and it's an unprecedented event.
We've already had the Brazos River breach a levee at Columbia Lakes.
Yes, southwest Brazoria County near
earlier today.
West Columbia.
West Columbia, yeah.
And so as you go farther down the Brazos River, the watershed becomes larger. So there's more water that comes down. So the closer you get to the Gulf Coast, the bigger the Brazos River is going to be. So it's definitely not a, hey, we're out of the woods on this one in any sense. Obviously, it's a horrible story with that Columbia Lakes levee being breached. But at this point, at least a ray of hope in a situation that seems like it's going to go on for a long time.
We haven't mentioned this in a while. We just learned a little while ago the president has landed in Corpus Christi to assess what's going on there. He's also making a stop in Austin after that today, and we're going to try to get you some pictures of that as soon as we get them into us here at KHOU. So the president is on the ground in Texas as promised. Not coming to the Houston area. And we're assuming that's just because it's still so chaotic here that it would just take away resources that can be used doing other things.
Absolutely. The rain today is starting to taper, which is fantastic news. As we expected, that the heaviest rain would move out last night. So what we've seen around at least downtown Houston is that the acute flooding, which happens when you get the incredible rainfall rates, the stuff that floods the freeways, is starting to recede. The small creeks are starting to fall in places, but all of the water that's fallen, well, it gets out of the creeks and off the freeways, but then it goes into those larger waterways like the bayous and the rivers. So that's why those are expected to crest in the next couple of days instead of right now. So we just drove around downtown about an hour ago, and where 45 goes under Elgin, it was a river by all senses of that definition yesterday, and now it's dry. But there are other problems now. There's a lot of debris and stuff like that on the highways, installed cars that have to be removed. So heavy rain right now, though, continues on the Bolivar Peninsula near Crystal Beach and Old Gilchrist, also inland Chambers County. Flash flood warning there remains in effect through this afternoon. It seems to be water under the bridge at this point. Looking to the north, we're looking at some moderate bands of rain along Highway 69/59, the East X Freeway, from Atascocita northward through Cleveland and Shepherd. It's the kind of rain at this point that's more of an annoyance than will make the flooding worse, but there are a couple of pockets where it's briefly heavier. I think the takeaway today is that it's cold outside relative to what we're used to. It's in the 70s, it's windy, and if you're wet, it's easy to get cold fast. So this is the kind of rain that you don't want to see. It would almost be nice to see a little bit of sunshine right now. Getting some more intense showers on the northwest side briefly, but the tropical storm Harvey, the center of it is now southeast of Houston. A center located right here, and that's good news as far as new rainfall, because now the dirty side of the storm is well east of the Houston area. The dirty side is the one that has the tornado threat and those rainfall totals in excess of 4 inches per hour. The track of this takes it, well, it looks like toward the Sabine River by Wednesday morning, tomorrow morning, and from there it moves out of the region. Thinking about folks in Louisiana, they're getting heavy rain right now as well. It's so far not as bad here, but they have had flash flood emergencies in places from Beaumont points east from the system. After that, it'll move out of here and we'll be in recovery mode. By the time our local rivers are cresting, we're going to see the sun coming out on Thursday and on Friday as this big area of high pressure in the Intermountain West starts to nose in. It's the same force, by the way, these two ridges of high pressure that stalled Harvey and has produced all of these horrible, horrible situations. Let's talk about winds, because now we've got a saturated ground. The ground has so much rain that the trees aren't as rooted into the ground, and so any wind will be a little bit more effective than otherwise it would in blowing trees down. We could have gusts of 35, 40 miles an hour over the next couple of hours, especially along the coastline. Here's Future Track starting off today at 1, keeping the heaviest rain again in southern Brazoria County, an area that already saw record rain for recorded history for tropical systems in the lower 48. 49.2 inches of rain falling in one community near Mary's Creek in Friendswood. It's just incredible, and just gives you an idea of the enormity of this calamity. This will be moving out of the region overnight tonight, so it looks like by tomorrow at lunchtime, even these remaining lingering showers will be history, and we'll start to dry things out, and we'll see a little bit of sun breaking out, especially on the west side, by tomorrow evening. So we may actually see the sunset tomorrow evening. I know a lot of us at this point just want to see the sun. All right, let's talk 7-day forecast. Today, we're going to have this rain lingering. Probably not so much a thunder threat, but also notice the temperatures remaining cool. So if you're outside, you're wet, it's breezy outside. 77 degrees sounds like it could be a little chilly outside if you're wet. It'll be in the upper 80s by Friday, Saturday, and then pushing around 90 for Sunday and for Monday. There is a chance for a few isolated storms. Hopefully none of those are heavy to make the flooding worse out there. Let's talk about rainfall totals so far. South Houston checking in with 43 inches in the last 4 days. Clear Lake, 41.5 inches. Friendswood, just over 40 inches at the official location. But again, Mary's Creek saw 49.2 inches for an all-time record so far in the lower 48 for these storms. These stats are incredible. I'm not going to go through each one, but the bottom line is it doesn't matter if you got 30 inches in a place like Meyerland, which is less than the 49 inches they got in Brazoria County, because Meyerland is severely affected with flooding because of the Braze Bayou. Homes still underwater there in many cases, and everybody dealing with travel issues, losing cars. Flash flood watch continues for the next couple of hours. So, guys, let's look at the weather forecast with this system. We're still dealing with the tropical storm watches offshore. But again, at this point, while the acute flooding on the streets is starting to fall, we're not getting those localized urban street flooding issues. All the water that has fallen is now traveling into the rivers and the bayous, and those will continue to rise. And we've got those uncontrolled releases on some of the reservoirs there with the Addicks and the Barker. So no doubt more flooding ahead. And we're going to have to wait for these rivers to crest before we can start talking about the waters receding, unfortunately, guys.
All right, Brooks, thank you. We do want to mention, thank you everyone at home for bearing with us and our broadcast. We know our signal keeps coming in and out at your home, and we're so sorry. Not much we can do to control that.
Sure. Online as well, our streaming sometimes has been a bit spotty here. We've set up at a new place on the fly. We're doing the best we can to bring you all the information you need to know here. So we know we've been coming in and out, but we've got a team of people here working on this 24/7.
Awesome team.
Yeah, we've got the best engineers on the planet. So if they're having trouble, you know it's trouble. Yeah, we're trying to link up satellites from all different places, one of them being Denver. So we're working on it. Just bear with us. And we thank you for hanging out. I'm getting a lot of people saying, hey, we know you're having trouble. We're still watching you, and
that's awesome.
And if you see us on our phones as well, that's what we're doing. We're answering a lot of your questions. Or
we're not texting.
So
we're looking for information.
Don't think that we're.
This is our laptop.
We're ignoring you.
This is our laptop computer.
It is.
I'm so glad that we have a laptop in our hands these days.
Yeah.
This is great. You're able to get so much done right in your hand.
We want to go to Jen Titus real quick here. She is at the National Guard Armory near Spring, and those folks are going to be deploying here to get out to Kingwood and other places and help some of those folks who need rescuing. Jen, what are you seeing out there?
Little mini scope of the number of people that are out there to help those that need it to be rescued from their homes. We can walk this way to kind of take a look at the force that's on their way out. I'm told about 20 soldiers were here for the National Guard, and they were just called out to the Kingwood subdivision. So they are loading up and trying to get there. They say they can't exactly tell me the number of soldiers that are here. Can we talk to you really quick? Where are you from?
From Houston.
You are from Houston. So where are you guys headed to right now?
Right now we're following the cops. We're helping them out, rescuing people, sending them to schools, different locations around Houston to help them out, shelters. Yes, ma'am.
We heard you guys are headed to Kingwood subdivision?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So kind of tell me today, what is your guys' main goal? We're live on KHOU. What is kind of like just the mission today?
Well, we got to go pick up some people who might be stuck in their houses. We're going to go help out HPD, and we're going to use these trucks to do it.
How long have your guys' days been over the past couple of days? When did you guys start?
We started yesterday. We were here for we got here at like 1. We were here the whole day. And now we're here. We're going to be here the next maybe 5-6 days.
What are you guys loading up in the vehicles we see behind you?
What we did yesterday is picked up soldiers that basically were stuck as well. We needed more personnel, so we picked them up. We have enough personnel now, enough trucks to do the mission. So right now we're basically loading up all chains, any type of straps, anything that we can use to help out any type of conditions. We also have our own military vehicles that if our own vehicles get stuck, we can help ourselves out so that way, we can continue with the mission without having any delays or anything like that.
The situation that you guys saw yesterday, I know you worked all day yesterday rescuing you said your own soldiers that needed help just to get here to help recover those in their houses that needed. What was the mission like yesterday? What was the recovery efforts like?
Yesterday it wasn't raining, just a lot of flood. So we went to as far as Pasadena to go pick up soldiers. It's just a lot of flooding yesterday, and so right now we're expecting a lot of rain and flood at the same time. Our trucks are capable of driving a lot of feet.
And we've been listening in there to KHOU. It's our local affiliate there in Houston and their coverage on the ground. I want to bring in our own Leslie Sanchez, a CBSN contributor. She's on the phone, personally impacted. She's from Sugar Land, Texas. She's a resident of Houston. I want to ask you, Leslie, first and foremost, how are you? How is your mother and your family?
Oh, Rena, thank you so much, and I want to thank everyone who's been so wonderful and supportive. We are good. We moved out of a mandatory evacuation area in Sienna Plantation into a voluntary evacuation area in Sugar Land, Texas, which is, we're really kind of watching the Brazos River right now. That's really the question, is whether these levees can hold the mass amount of water they're expecting, and they're calling this a 1,000-year flood. It moved from 500-year to 800-year to 1,000-year flood just because of the probability being so slim that it would ever crest at such a high level.
Leslie, walk me through this exactly. We actually have some photos of what you've been going through and the flood levels. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing for people who are not there right now?
Rena, it's so hard to explain. These are areas, Houston is so vast, and just like a lot of other major cities, you have many suburban areas that move into the medical center. They move into downtown. There's energy corridors, and that's who these families are, these suburban families that live out here. And the Brazos River has always been a part of life. Houston's a bayou city. You expect flooding. Just even last year, record levels of flooding, but people tend to recover and know how to respond. What's so strange here is this storm is just dumping so much rain, it will not leave Houston. There's been over 150 tornado alerts. I don't think anyone here has slept, really gotten more than a few hours of sleep since Friday. They ring constantly on the phone, people running to their closets. And we didn't really take the threat of tornadoes, I will say that, in this neighborhood as seriously until that first Friday night when it just tore through Sienna Plantation, ripped roofs off. You had a lot of lumber, just debris hurling in and exploding windows into children's bedrooms. It was harrowing, to say the least, but immediately neighbors came together and start cleaning the debris. You had high school students from Ridge Point High School in Sienna moving out there, moving debris, and we thought, afterward you get through a hurricane, moves, recover, but this ongoing rain and rising river has really been what people are seeing. We cannot put an exclamation point on this. It is just unprecedented. You hear it over and over again, but people are just trying to make rapid decisions. I have my mom. She doesn't swim. She was trying to keep her calm. She's in another room right now. But these are decisions people are making with their children. You have multiple generations in one home. They're just trying to, do you evacuate? If so, where do you go? How do you get there? You're making rapid decisions and just trying to do the best job you can.
And Leslie, you were talking about the reservoir. Can you walk us through that again? I don't think people understand. They are saying now that the Addicks Reservoir, that it's just overtopped so much that they are now the potential of flooding into Houston, South Houston, the levee at Columbia Lakes. They're worried about nearly 50 inches. It's just gone over, and there's no place for it to go but to eventually flow into these communities. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah, because Houston is so well known for flooding, they built a series of these reservoirs to hold the water. The problem is that because this rain, if you just look at those maps, you see just tremendous amounts of rain. Now they're thinking 50 inches is just causing the reservoirs to become equal with the bayous. So they're no longer able to move that water out. So the Army Corps of Engineers, as many know, started these controlled releases, which was basically saying we are going to flood 1,000 homes in hopes of protecting the dam from bursting. Not good news for people that live in some of those areas. Those were, and you can almost see the sequencing. Those were the homes in the Houston areas, Houston suburbs, that were flooding yesterday. And we cannot thank all the people that have come from, as far away as California, just with boats, inner tubes. Remember the first days it was air mattresses, anything to move these people out. Now the water, you compound that with some of the rivers that have been taking in a lot of this water that are moving down toward the Gulf of Mexico. That water is now coming through Houston, just from other parts of the state, and that's causing the rivers to rise at an exceedingly rapid pace. So there's a tremendous amount of concern with county and local, certainly city officials, on where do they evacuate. And Rena, the big issue is evacuation. There's not clarity on evacuations. They're opening shelters almost every 20 minutes because they have to, but you don't ever know where to go. They route you one way, and then there's high water. Then they route you another way, and you have your family, your children, your parents in the car. People know flooding is imminent in Houston. They have to evacuate, despite the fact they do not want to, and they're putting a tremendous amount of faith in these levees. County officials are telling them to move. So you've got this. Do you shelter at home? I didn't want the situation where my mom and I are in a boat.
I know, Leslie. And
Mom did not want to be in a boat, so I could see her with a life vest. And it's not over yet, but I'm doing everything I can to keep my family from wearing life vests, on an inner tube, floating down the Brazos River. So I make light of it now, but that's really where we are.
I know. That's one thing we can say about you, Leslie. You always take your humor with you no matter what the situation might be. That's our Leslie Sanchez. I do want to ask you about Mom, though. I'll
be streaming live. I'll do my Instagram live stories as I like to do. So
we just might be taking those up, Leslie. I do want to ask you, though, about your mom. And you take such good care of your mother and look out for her. And I know you travel frequently back there. And this is home. This is your hometown area. I want to ask you about what it's like when you make the call to evacuate. What's the situation for you personally? When do you decide, and how do you decide when it's time to go?
Sure. It's interesting because my mom has a therapy dog. It's a little Maltipoo. She's a year old. That she takes with her everywhere. So it's not just Mom, but her dog, our puppy, and her crate and her toys, and it's really, the mobility of my mom. She's starting to trip more like a lot of people. I have to make sure she's on solid ground. I don't want her walking through water. I already had to drive through some kind of lower water, but it's inevitable. You're going to have to drive through water just to evacuate now. And you're making a decision about what do you bring. She had forgotten her heart medication, one of them that she takes, and I actually had to go back and forth and try to find that. So, you're thinking, is the pharmacy open? How do you find this kind of medication? There's so many other variables you have to take into consideration. So I'm encouraging people to have that to-go bag. I have talked to so many people, get it together now, because if you are forced to leave or if you finally have to heed the evacuation order, can't be, moving so fast.
It's a good point. We're looking right now, Leslie, at live pictures. We see the senators from Texas right now. Looking at them right now, right there is, of course, Ted Cruz, and behind him just a second ago was John Cornyn. They are expected to be right there at that briefing with the president. Will be attending. I believe this is Corpus Christi. Is that correct? The facility where the president will actually be meeting with first responders and talking to them directly. Both senators there, and critical time because, as you see in the back there in the black shirt, Senator Cornyn has an important role. He's the whip of the Senate, and it's going to be personal for him. He's going to have to whip votes to get folks to sign up for these bills to help pay. It's going to be massively important to get the funding and the infrastructure. Senators in the past who haven't received funding or were struggling during Sandy have now said no matter what, even though these senators were somewhat against funding relief for Hurricane Sandy, they will be on their side and not hesitate. Leslie, I do want to ask you, when you're looking at the leadership here, the politics of this, there are politics even with a natural disaster of this magnitude. What do you think the president needs to do today?
Sure, he needs to release those funds as soon as possible and not get tangled up in the politics. I mean, there's a lot of optics going on. I'm from Corpus Christi. Mom and I are from Corpus Christi. I was born and raised there. It's a three-sided city. We're used to hurricanes. This is not a time to be really looking for, these optics and I'm on the ground. It's a time to work together to ensure they have all the resources they need, that we have those resources. And I think if the president does that, it will serve the state well. That already there's criticism, Rena, of the mayor for not having an evacuation plan sooner. Why are so many people now being evacuated in these treacherous conditions? There's going to be a lot of blame game going on back and forth, but I think right now the most immediate thing is to allow those resources to move through here, and these people need food. We need food and we need water immediately.
Food and water, two important things. We've also heard, Leslie, that the two main airports, George H.W. Bush Airport, Intercontinental Airport, and Hobby Airport will remain closed until Wednesday. What else are you hearing about getting the supplies in, Leslie?
That was one of the questions. There's some food companies that have already donated that are very generous. People are just getting in their cars, and it's really a business opportunity and a business. It's a lot of dependence on these businesses who may be able to divert some of their resources sooner. So it's a supply chain problem for many here. But I think if you see more private industry come forward, faith-based organizations like they are, there is now an orchestrated effort to use, for example, the National Guard to go ferry some of those resources in. So I think if they make it available, now we're getting infrastructure to get those resources to the city faster.
So important, Leslie. You raise a good point. If you're joining us now, we are standing by. President Trump and the governor of Texas is expected to update on the situation to Hurricane Harvey. He has touched down. He is in Corpus Christi, a population of about 325,000 people. The truth is the damage here in Corpus Christi hasn't been as extensive as the rest of the area that was deeply impacted, Houston and the surrounding areas. The power has been restored largely in Corpus Christi. The hotels are pretty much jam-packed, filled with evacuees. They do have power in much of the area, but this is one area the president's chosen to go because it is still such an unfolding, developing situation. People are using the word biblical to describe the proportion of exactly what they are experiencing. And as the rainfall continues, we are watching as one of the levees has been breached at this point. And what that means is that water is now going to flow into neighborhoods. We know the Army Corps of Engineers has been working to slowly try and deal with the flow and release some of that water, but it is just too much. The rainfall is just too much. And again, as I mentioned, we are standing by for the president, who is joined by both of the senators of Texas. We're also joined by Leslie Sanchez. This is all very personal for Leslie. Corpus Christi is her hometown. Leslie, you were talking about the evacuations. I think about these people, Nora O'Donnell and our crew on the ground reporting thousands of people being turned away because they can't make it into these shelters. And you were saying that they are telling you sometimes to go to one shelter, then rerouting people. Can you explain what that's like trying to be an evacuee, getting some help?
Sure. I think the big important part, because there are many people, Rena, who are still in a mandatory evacuation area that have not left, right? They're making a calculation with their family to do where they stay despite the warning. The challenge is flooding is imminent. That was the report this morning from Fort Bend County and Harris County emergency officials, that river flooding has not even started yet. Right, so all the flooding we're seeing right now, some of it's the rain, some of it's the bayou, some of this is that the reservoirs are overflowing. Now we're getting to the rivers are starting to flood, and are the levees going to hold? That's the next part of this whole tragic and very difficult situation. So leaving, you already have high water. You have to pack what you need. And the shelters, we're seeing more faith-based organizations open up. I will say there's several churches now, some high schools, but it almost seems as soon as they open, they're at capacity. And a lot of families, I'm fortunate I did not have to go to a shelter, but many families, my neighbors that have...
Leslie, I just want to interrupt you for a second. We are seeing the president entering the room right now, Governor Abbott there. Just joined him a short time ago, and you can see, obviously, First Lady Melania Trump right behind the president. He is going to receive this briefing right now and address the nation as well. Let's listen in.
Well, I want to welcome the President of the United States to the great state of Texas. I want to express my gratitude for our fellow Texans, and especially the people of Corpus Christi, for giving the President such a warm welcome on his ride over here, showing the gratitude that we all have for the President. I want to express my deep gratitude to the President.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Anthony Mason in New York. President Trump is about to make some remarks from Corpus Christi, Texas. He and several members of his cabinet flew there this morning to observe the federal government's response to Harvey, which has been punishing the Gulf Coast of Texas since Friday, of course. Some locations are reporting nearly 4 feet of rain, with more, of course, on the way. As Harvey re-strengthens over the Gulf, thousands have been rescued from the floodwaters by local police, the Coast Guard, and private citizens who've mobilized. The shelters are filling up. The main shelter in Houston was at nearly double its capacity last night. The president right now is meeting with state and local officials, while in Corpus Christi, Governor Abbott is speaking right now.
What do you need? How can we help? You can count on us. What I've learned is we can count on the President of the United States and his staff for helping Texas. Texas has been tested, but our response to this challenge has been made much more effective because of the very effective way the President and his staff has helped Texas respond to this challenge. So, Mr. President, thank you. Welcome to Texas.
I appreciate it. It's so nice, Governor, and it's really my honor. This is a very special place and a special state. And Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn, thank you very much, Senator Cornyn, for being here. We appreciate it. I know it's hard to get here for both of you. You were trapped in various locations, but we appreciate you both being here. I want to thank my staff, my cabinet. We have quite a few of our cabinet here. You know, Ben Carson, obviously, from HUD, and Tom Price and Linda McMahon, small business, which is now big business, because you're going to be, when you add them all up, you're going to be helping a lot of the people in Texas and doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Linda. But we have had a tremendous group of folks. Our acting director, Elaine, thank you very much for the job you've done. And a man who's really become very famous on television over the last couple of days, Mr. Long. We appreciate it very much. You have been just outstanding. And I can tell you that my folks just telling me how great your representatives have been in working together. It's a real team. And we want to do it better than ever before. We want to be looked at in 5 years and 10 years from now as this is the way to do it. This was of epic proportion. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. And I just want to say that working with the governor and his entire team has been an honor for us. So, Governor, again, thank you very much. And we won't say congratulations. We don't want to do that. You know, we don't want to congratulate. We'll congratulate each other when it's all finished. But you have been terrific, really terrific. It's a great honor. And you've been my friend here for a long time. And with that, maybe you could say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the whole community is coming together. Right here where the brunt of the Category 4 hurricane winds came in just north of Corpus Christi, we're already starting to affect recovery. Recovery is a slow process, but rest assured that we're doing everything we can to unify our efforts down to support, the local responders, the first responders that we have here. Yesterday I put eyes on the ground down in Rockport. We already have points of distribution flowing. We're working in conjunction with the Governor's National Guard, where FEMA's supplying meals and water, and the National Guard is helping to run those distribution points. That's how this system works. While all eyes are on Houston, and so are mine, we've got a long way to go. We're going to have to set up expectations of the citizens, and we're going to have to continue a unified effort down to help the state of Texas ultimately recover. So very quickly, the objectives stay the same. The event, unfortunately, to the north of us is not over. We're still in a life-saving, life-sustaining mission. We're very aware of the issues at the convention center, but let me be clear. This is not the Superdome. The convention center, we are sustaining food. They have food. We're in security. I have an incident management team inside the city of Houston as we speak. And more people are being moved to shelters to stabilize the situation. The next thing is that we're pushing commodities. Once the water goes down, we'll continue to push not only commodities, but also help to get people registered in the system to receive assistance from all of us. Assistance doesn't just come from FEMA. It comes from many organizations who are represented here today by Secretary Price, Secretary Carson, and others. The next thing is that we're looking at power restoration. We're maintaining security. Ms. Duke, mobilize the Homeland Security Surge Capacity Force. With that comes law enforcement to make sure that we're overcoming and anticipating any security needs that we have. And then also with Secretary Price over here, we're working with not only the governor's disaster medical teams, but we're also sending federal disaster medical teams in, not only to the convention center today, there's already some on site, but there's going to be multiple areas, not only for crisis counseling, but also to make sure that we're meeting access and functional needs. The access is a challenge to getting all of the supplies in. Once the roadway systems come out, we've amassed quite the federal force to be able to support the local and state efforts. For example, the governor pulls 12,000 National Guard troops in. We're pulling units out of Fort Hood as the federal government, federal DOD forces are coming in as well. We pulled several hundred trucks and staff just from assets right here in the state of Texas, and that's how the system works. This recovery is going to be frustrating. We're going to be here with you to help you guide through it. It's going to be tough to navigate all of the programs that come available, but we're here to help. So with that, I'd like to pass it along to our friends at the Coast Guard.
Mr. President, good afternoon, sir. This is where your Coast Guard serves at its best. You've got a bias for action. We are here in the state of Texas to support the state of Texas, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the lead federal agency. Sir, we have pulled Coast Guard men and women from across the country, capabilities, helicopters, fixed-wing response, incident management specialists, and they're on deck, sir, in Texas here getting after the task at hand. I'd be remiss, sir, to not tell you that as you look, obviously the landfall here, phase one was down here. We've been out, we've seen the effects here, and our local folks here, Tony Minute will speak to you more about that. Up in Houston, we are all in with the challenge there. We brought everything to the fight. The weather for the next couple of days is going to remain challenging. We'll probably see average rainfalls for the year, 50 inches, 4 weeks in. And I don't think we know what that looks like. So if I can tell you, the Coast Guard, Department of Homeland Security team with the DOD forces, National Guard, I spent Sunday and Monday with the governor at different locations. We are seamlessly lashed up with the state. We are getting better at every day. It is a problem of catastrophic proportions, sir, that I don't think we've done before. But I can tell you, we are all in and we're aligned. And I'm very encouraged, sir, about how this thing is going to go forward, just in terms of cooperation. With this, sir, I'd just like to give Captain Tony Hahn a couple moments here. He's locally, give you a perspective on the flight that's been here at this service building.
Good morning, Mr. President. Captain Tony Hahn, the Sector Commander here at Sector Corpus Christi, and also the Incident Commander for our Unified Command. Our Unified Command comprises over 150 federal, state, and local agencies, and we also bring industry partners in there so we can make sure we're covering all our bases as we get the port open. So I want to walk through a timeline of our activities that we've done over the course of Hurricane Harvey, just to let you know where we're at. So on Tuesday, the storm shifted and became a hurricane. Our job is to really assess the port and see where we need to be to get assets out of it. And that's what we started doing on Wednesday. We started making preparations. We locked down facilities. We get assets, deep draft vessels out to sea so they don't damage the port conditions. Thursday, we moved to evacuating all our forces. We push our forces out of harm's way and our people so we can come back in after the storm to help, as soon as we can. On Friday, we moved our boats and aircraft away from the storm so they could immediately respond. So now Harvey was upgraded to Category 4 hurricane. Our team is bunkered down in Gobbstown, Texas. We do a continuity of operations in Gobbstown, about 20 miles or so from here. We practiced that many times, so we're ready to do that. When Harvey made landfall, several ships that were moored in Corpus Christi broke their moorings, and mariners in distress were calling us for help. At that point, we had to wait till the parameters changed, but we sent our helicopters north, and we saved 19 mariners' lives that night. Later on Saturday morning, we began our port assessments, and the conditions weren't good for getting boats on the water, but with our O-flights and among the damage, we noted a grounded drill ship at the front of the Corpus Christi channel, so that's a major challenge for us. We continued over flights to respond to search and rescue calls on Saturday, and the weather conditions wouldn't allow us to really get on the water for us to try and get the port open, but we're working on that. So Sunday, now the storm shifted to up to Houston, and so we surged all our search and rescue resources out of Alice, Texas, up to Houston, and we're helping every way we can with that effort by surging resources. We're using our fixed wing assets down here to run logistics run all over the state to make sure that the operational commanders and police are doing what they need. Additionally, we brought our boats up from the south so we can start our operational activities here now that the storm's going. So Monday, we started our water operation with our partners. It's a huge emphasis for getting the port open for commerce and all the activities we do with the port. So our partners at the Army Corps of Engineers began their surveys of the channel, checking for shoaling and obstructions. And our ACE navigation team started their evaluations of marking the water with all the buoys and the channel markers, just to make sure when we open the port it's safe. So far we've found over 180 grounded vessels. Of those, our major concern is that large drill ship that's at the mouth of the Corpus Christi Channel. Last night the tide came up, winds came out of the bands from the storm, and it actually raised itself and drifted over the other side of the channel. So salvaging that boat is a big priority for us. Additionally, we're working with the Texas General Land Office on all the pollution activities. So far, the good news is we've not seen anything major in terms of pollution response or pollution releases. So to close, we're about 1/3. We're done with our channel surveys with the Army Corps. Once we complete the survey and salvage the grounded ship, we'll be in a good position to open the port. Right now, our biggest challenge right now is potential shoaling, and that'll require dredging operations. So we're really looking at that closely. Mr. President,
well, I want to tell you, and I can speak for the governor because we spoke about it. We are very proud of the Coast Guard, the job they've done, with the lives they've saved. We're very, very proud of you. And thank you very much.
Mr. President. Mr. President, about a couple thousand rescues a day rolled up with everybody else's in this economic issue in the ports. We are in with the Border Protection Agency. We're in with the facilities owners, the pilots on the waterways. The conditions right now are not amenable to get the ports open. We recognize that's a national priority, and we will keep at that and collectively get to that right answer as soon as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mr. President, at this time, before the press pulls out, there's information that I'd like to share in regards to how citizens can get involved. So here again, it's the whole community. Neighbor helping neighbor is going to be needed in helping Texas overcome. So very quickly, if you would like to register for assistance underneath the governor's declared counties, there's 18 declared counties for individual assistance underneath the president's disaster declaration. That's disasterassistance.org. That puts in, disasterassistance.gov. I apologize. Disasterassistance.gov. That's the FEMA Individual Assistance Center system. There's also ways, if you're looking to volunteer, nvoad.org, nvoad.org. There's also within the state of Texas, onestarfoundation.org. There's also, and we'll leave it at that, or redcross.org as well. So thank you, and at this time, this concludes the press briefing.
Thank you very much.
All right, President Trump being briefed on the status of the the rescue and recovery and effort in Texas. He was briefed by the Coast Guard. He was also briefed by the administrator of FEMA, Brock Long, who was there in the firehouse in Corpus Christi with him. Mr. Long said that they are still in a life-saving mission. He said he was aware of the situation at the convention center in Houston overnight, where it was about double capacity. Our Nora O'Donnell was there early this morning and reported there were some 9,000 people. Capacity was considered 5,000 who spent the night there, most of whom did not have bedding. But Mr. Long said this is not the Superdome and would not be. Let's listen to Nora.
So tell me your name.
Michelle.
Michelle. Mm-hmm. Where are you from in the Houston area?
Northwest side of Chitwell. Northeast side.
What's happened to your home?
Basically, the water is going in and the roof is starting to collapse.
How were you rescued?
The police, my dump truck.
You were one of the people in the dump truck. I probably saw you.
Yeah.
When you came out. How long did you have to ride in the dump truck?
Well, about an hour because it was trying to get to other people that they couldn't get to because the water was too high for the dump trucks.
Too high.
Nora O'Donnell in the convention center this morning talking with some of the people who spent the night there. Again, some 9,000 people, according to Nora's reporting, spent the night in the convention center in Houston. Capacity is 5,000. The administrator of FEMA, Brock Long, saying they are starting to move people out of there to other places where they can. But again, they're estimating that some 30,000 people, maybe more in Houston, will need shelter. I want to go back to Jamie Yuccas in Corpus Christi, where the president is right now. Jamie, it's looking a lot drier there. Of course, the hurricane made landfall a little to the north and east of Corpus Christi. What are conditions in Corpus Christi like now?
Well, that's Anthony. I wanted to point that out because obviously the conditions are much different than 200 miles to the northeast of where we're standing right now in Houston. Here in Corpus Christi, it's about 85 degrees. The sunshine is out. Now, the reason the president came to this particular fire station, and he is still inside from what we're told right now, he'll be making his way out shortly. The reason he's here is he did not want to be a distraction to any of the recovery efforts at all in this particular situation, since it is such a dire situation right now in that Houston area. As you said, the hurricane did make landfall as a Cat 4 hurricane just about 30 minutes from here to the north and east. Rockport was really the ground zero of Hurricane Harvey. And I can tell you from driving through there is lots of devastation. We don't know at this point if the president will make his way to see that firsthand. But as we were driving yesterday, I have to tell you, the roads are very treacherous, and you have a giant motorcade that would have to try to make its way down to that area of Rockport, where there's still water on a number of the freeways there, getting in and out of that small city of 10,000. So both the FEMA administrator, the governor, and the president deciding to come here first. They will now spend a little bit more time here, possibly seeing some of the damage in the Corpus Christi area before heading to Austin, where they will get a debrief on the state operations that are happening. I want to show you the crowds, though, that showed up for this. Now, when he shows up to a fire station like this, it's not put on a schedule. They don't let the public know that the president is going to be visiting. But I can tell you that a number of these people in the crowd are very big Trump supporters. A number of them have law enforcement here locally who are working this particular event. When they heard that the president would be here, they showed up. There's a few hundred people who showed up really within a half an hour. We just started watching people walk in. I'm still watching people walk in to try to get some picture of the president and the first lady when they heard he was coming here to Corpus Christi, Texas. Anthony.
Thanks, Jamie. And among those at this briefing the president had at the firehouse in Corpus Christi were Texas's two U.S. senators, Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. We overheard Ted Cruz telling his colleagues there that he had a very difficult time getting back into Texas, both airports being closed. I want to go now to Chip Reed at the White House. Chip, the president is talking about actually making a second trip to the region this weekend. This is his first briefing. What stood out to you in that briefing that the president attended?
Well, the president is doing his best to avoid making the mistake that George W. Bush made back in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina. President Bush, very wisely, some would say, wanted to stay out of the way so he didn't interfere with the rescue and recovery operation, but it made him look like he was disengaged. President Trump is doing his best to make it look like he's very engaged, sent out a lot of tweets this weekend, but he is setting the bar very high. In those tweets, he talked about the wonderful coordination among all the different agencies and the great talent on the ground. And in that briefing just now, he said, we want to do this better than it's ever been done before. In 5 years, we want to look back at this and say, this is how to do it. Anytime you set the bar really high in politics or in dealing with a natural disaster, you take a risk. And the president's taking a little bit of a risk here by being so positive this early about the response.
Yes,
Anthony?
but also obviously also aware, Chip, that when you don't respond properly, the consequences politically can be sizable. Chip, what do we know about this second possible trip that the president referred to the other day, that he might come back on Saturday because the storm, it looks like, is going to make landfall again?
That's right. This is a storm that is staying where it is, and most experts say we haven't even seen the worst of the flooding yet. So the president clearly wants to make everybody understand this is what he is focused on. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders said in a brief gaggle aboard Air Force One on the way to Texas, she of course is his press secretary, that he will be going back on Saturday. She doesn't know where exactly. It will depend on the conditions and on the weather, but he plans to go back to Texas and perhaps Louisiana too, where they are also really suffering the brunt of this. Anthony?
Yeah, we're talking about a second landfall, what it looks like about 24 hours from now at the Texas-Louisiana border, Chip. You're looking at the radar there now. In Texas, as we heard some of the folks briefing the president say, they're looking at some places at 50 inches of rainfall, which is basically a year's worth of rain over a weekend, an extraordinary number. Again, the president in Corpus Christi right now, he is deliberately kind of going around the hardest hit area where there is so much work being done. The White House did not want to interfere with the rescue efforts and the attempts to get people to safety, but they wanted to show that they were in Texas and getting a firsthand look at what's going on. So the president, starting in Corpus Christi at a fire station there, he will be moving up to Austin later in the day. There will be much more coverage of Harvey on your local news on this CBS station and our streaming network CBSN. I'll be back later with Norah O'Donnell in Houston for a special edition of the CBS Evening News. Till then, I'm Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Arena 9, and joining me here on set with our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Harvey, Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's a reporter for Real Clear Politics and a CBSN political contributor. Also joining us, Ed O'Keefe in Washington. He's a Washington Post congressional reporter and CBS News political contributor. And Leslie Sanchez, she's on the phone from Sugar Land, Texas, a CBSN political contributor and also a longtime Houston resident. Caitlin, I want to start with you on set. We heard the president say, we want to do this better than ever before, talking particularly about how he wants this in 5 years to be looked at and said, this is how they did it right. It's not clear if he's going to be meeting with evacuees or victims of this hurricane. What do you think the goal is?
Well, here the goal is to show that he is concerned and is near the site, right, 200 miles away, of course, but not wanting to distract from the efforts that are at the center of the zone. What is interesting here through a political lens is that this is a huge test for this president. Presidents, as we know, have to deal with disasters like this that they do not expect, and how they deal with them could, in many ways, define their presidencies. You heard you heard earlier this frame of reference referring to this is not the Superdome. That is referring to the way that Louisiana, which is the Katrina 12th anniversary today. So the president is also tasked with showing empathy here. He has been criticized for not really doing that in times of crisis, and I think a lot of eyes are looking to him to see how he acts as a leader through this particular crisis, and whether he is actually able to show that kind of consoler-in-chief, empathetic president that others have been able to.
To Ed O'Keefe, Ed, who can forget that image of President Bush that was long criticized, President George W. Bush looking out of the helicopter of Air Force One as he's looking down at the damage on Katrina. What do you think the concerns are for the president as he heads to the scene, and the fact that how can you be consoler-in-chief if you're not meeting with evacuees or victims on the ground?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. Look, this is a president in desperate need of a good photo op, and I think they're certainly hoping that today goes relatively error-free. The fact that he's 200 miles south in Corpus Christi and then going around the storm up to Austin for a more detailed briefing will give them images of him showing concern and getting updated by local officials. But you're right, unless there is some kind of more direct interaction with folks, and maybe it'll happen outside this fire station in Corpus Christi, maybe it'll happen in some other way in Austin or over the weekend, the ability to demonstrate his compassion, if he wants to, will be tricky unless he's able to see people who have been removed by this. And look, this is a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. You either stay away and you're seen as being too remote and distant from it. You get in there and you potentially divert resources or make it tricky for local authorities to respond, and you're going to get accused of taking advantage of the situation. So this seems to be, at least in its early hours here, a good chance for him to come, get an update, vow to come back. But he set the bar high. I think it's notable he says that there, that we're going to do this better than we've ever done it before, and in 5 years you'll be able to look back and say this went well. That's a high bar to meet at a time when you're now dealing with a natural disaster that federal authorities had never contemplated, never rehearsed for, and have not seen before. Major urban flooding on a wide scale across the fourth largest city. And I think it's notable that Brock Long, the FEMA administrator, who used to deal specifically with hurricane response for FEMA in the southern region of the country, and who then served as Alabama's State Emergency Management Director, and now is running the agency, very quickly went out there and said, this is not the Superdome. It's not. There hasn't been mass hysteria at the main evacuation center and in the streets of Houston yet. But again, to say that and not know how the next few days unfold is a risky bet.
Yeah, there's still so much left to figure out with the conditions on the ground. A second landfall expected in the next 24 hours, likely. I want to turn to Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, you're in Texas. You were evacuated. Give us an update on you and your family first off, and give us a sense of what it's like being an evacuee.
Sure. We're in Sugarland, Texas right now, which is a voluntary evacuation area. We're basically watching the levees and the rise of the Brazos River. That is, we know that flooding is imminent, and the river flooding hasn't even started yet. That's really the phase. But the communities I've been in, I was next door in Sienna Plantation, mandatory evacuation. People trying to get out. I'm posting photos on Instagram and Facebook that basically you can't get out the route that you were encouraged to do so on LJ Parkway is now flooded. So you have a lot of families scrambling, trying to, A, get out of the neighborhood, and B, figure out where to go because the shelters are at capacity, and they're opening new shelters, but it's hard to disseminate that information. But I will say something about the president's thing. Ed and Caitlin are exactly right, because you're setting the bar so high to say things are going well. People are being evacuated on air mattresses or on a shrimp pontoon boat, just driving through what is now a neighborhood that looks like a river or the Mississippi. And you're jumping into a public service, public works truck being taken to a destination you have no idea. So this is not going well. People are on, there's a giant flamingo floating device, and you have children being pulled out of a neighborhood. This is not going well. And yes, the federal resources are getting here, and we're 3 days into this. We're just now starting to see the National Guard, but it takes time to get organized, and it's been Texans taking care of Texans, Louisianans coming over to take care of Texans, anybody who's nearby and was able to get here on a boat. So the bar is extraordinarily high, because right now there's tremendous stress and frustration for these communities.
Leslie, I remember covering President Obama and being on the ground with him during the tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma, and it meant so much to the people on the ground, even though they weren't able to shake his hand, physically meet him, that the President of the United States came to a disaster area. Do you get that sense in Texas that people are happy that the President is there?
Right now, it's too early to tell. Rena, I think in Corpus Christi, being from Corpus, there's a tremendous level of support anytime the president shows up and shows that he's there to give guidance and support and draw national attention to what they're feeling and their personal devastation. That's always clearly a powerful image and message. I think it was a correct decision not to come to Houston. You can it is such a critical situation in terms of water rescues by the second right now. There's thousands of people being rescued at this moment, and every resource is completely stretched, which is why you have individuals buying rafts, taking whatever they have to share food and rescue people. So it is not a time to handle an entourage of that magnitude, but it will remain to be seen. I will tell you, Senator Cruz has been here at the George R. Brown Convention Center, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, certainly the mayor, and I think it was well received. They're very personal. It's very private messages for the people in these shelters, and that, I think, will serve the community well.
I want to turn to Caitlin. Caitlin, we also saw there the senators of Texas, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, on the ground there with the president. Ted Cruz, somewhat tumultuous relationship with the president. Cornyn, he's the whip. He's got to get out there, get those votes to get the funding, and it's very personal for him.
Yes, my family, that's not just waiting to happen inside Texas right now. Of course, we want to bring the whole thing to una for let go see I'm small and see what we go through. Right now in studio, we're okay. You know, we're not getting no flooding around. We, in fact, we can't come out for go see if we go get some food around because some half store and go open the area. So that means it's not too intense because we say we did the outskirts of Houston, and so we not expect any serious and adverse weather condition, even though we're not too far away from the Brazos River, when one of the rivers then we didn't say get for flood, they get for overflow, and they get for threatening the whole area. In fact, now near the me Bobo in school day, and so but you know say schools then close. So we monitor that as well for see you know if anything will happen with advice, you know. But for now, I will just look at the coverage from CBS, of course, one of the main television networks in America. We'll look at waiting at the broadcast, and so let's see what is going on. And so now that's what they look at right now, my family. We're very sorry for the noise we hear inside the whole thing, but hopefully everything will be okay, and that you know, we'll not go through any serious adverse weather conditions. So one for me, we'll not continue for just watch with space as we continue for you know, bring you all this coverage. Meanwhile, one for also say plenty thank you to the one that we done the call we done the, you know, check on we for make sure say everything okay with we appreciate that. And one for me they know say yes indeed we are okay. I mean, just like what you see me now, we are fine. All right. So one for tell you plenty thank you for that. So once more we'll go back now the CBS studio.
Like crashes from midterm exams or term papers at the end of a semester. That's essentially what Congress faces. And on top of that, now you have these disasters. For example, the flood insurance program. That's on the list. It may have ranked number 15 or 16 on it. It's now jumped up to like number 3 because they're going to very quickly here exhaust their borrowing authority and going to need more money. Same goes for that spending bill, because as part of that spending bill now, which is also set to or needs to be passed by October 1st, you got to come up now with billions more dollars to pay for the relief that's going to be needed in Texas. And some estimates this morning from lawmakers in Texas is that it's going to hit at least $150 billion, which will exceed the damages from Superstorm Sandy, exceed the damages from Katrina. So not only are we seeing records broken when it comes to rainfall, but you're probably going to see records broken in terms of price. And that'll be really tricky for a Republican Party that has said in the past that when you do these massive spending programs, you got to find spending cuts. Most of the people who have been calling for those cuts happen to be Texas lawmakers. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that. And yes, the president has to deal, of course, with North Korea as well, which is a significant threat and ongoing. I mean, frankly, he could be back here in Washington hosting a Situation Room briefing on that in addition to this, because arguably they're just as urgent and important tasks for him to deal with. One other point, though, regarding congressional debate. I talked this morning with Congressman Philemon Vela, who covers the southern tip of Texas, an area that's been pretty much spared from this, and he's a Democrat. I said, look, you probably have heard your colleagues out east or across the country kind of pointing out the potential hypocrisy here of a lot of Texas lawmakers who may have voted against this kind of disaster aid in the past and might want to make hay of it now, especially in the Democratic Party. And he said, look, don't do that. He said, you know, this is more serious, and Congress needs to move quickly. And he was calling essentially on his own fellow Democrats to not make hay of this because it's just too serious a situation, obviously costly and deadly. And he thinks there's just no room for political gamesmanship when it comes to this.
And the images are really matching exactly that very tale. Leslie, you say that the president has already proposed cuts to FEMA and rollback protections for infrastructure flooding. Do you think that that'll come back to haunt him?
Rena, the reality is it probably will. This is a situation where you have a lot of people, even within the agency in FEMA, that have not been confirmed. It has been very difficult to get people through because the president has micromanaged a lot of those hiring of those positions. So there's going to be criticism. I think it remains to be seen only because it's so soon and it's hard to see how we're going to come out on the other side. If things are managed now and enough resources get there and FEMA can respond in an effective way. I know that the individuals from housing and urban development are here on the ground. You have some Texans that happen to already be here that are on the ground. There were individuals from the VA who happened to be here for a conference that were already on the ground and they're volunteering. So they're out in the field offices. I think there's been an immediate rapid response, but from the political engagement, getting people confirmed and having leadership and management, it's a really shallow crew in there.
Leslie, we hope you stay safe. Please send our love to your mom as well and keep us posted on your whereabouts. I want to thank Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Well, Harvey continues to dump massive amounts of rain on the Houston area. Thousands are seeking shelters. Floodwaters just keep rising. Another 10 inches of rain could still fall. Kenneth Craig has the latest from Houston.
First responders waded through chest-deep water in Baytown this morning to rescue stranded residents.
We had no idea that we would have that kind of support and help because I know there's people that need it a lot more than we do. So.
Similar scenes are playing out over and over again across the Houston area. Civilian volunteers found Laura Blinton in her flooded home. She regrets not leaving sooner.
Yes, I should have.
The rain from Tropical Storm Harvey is staggering, historic, and still coming down. So far, more than 4 feet of rain in Friendswood, 43 inches in South Houston, and 41 in Baytown. And with more than 6,000 rescues and counting, shelters are overflowing.
I tried to get a room here in the Hilton Hotel, but they're already full. You know.
The largest shelter here in the city is at the convention center. There are at least 9,000 people here, but only 5,000 cots. Officials are working to give flood victims everything they need.
We have a fully operational pharmaceutical facility. We have doctors on site. People are getting their needs met. We essentially have an emergency room that can operate there and handle any emergency needs.
Harvey is still a tropical storm as it spins off the Gulf Coast. Forecasters say it could make a second landfall just east of Houston, bringing more misery to a region that's already suffering.
And Kenneth Craig joins us now from Houston. Kenneth, what are officials saying on the current state of the flooding disaster and especially the response in Texas?
Well, they're very worried about what is going to happen next. Right now, I'm in downtown Houston. You can see the convention center behind me. The concern right now, here at least, is what is going to happen to downtown. There are those 2 reservoirs that are beyond capacity, and they are quickly continuing to fill up. Yesterday, as you know, they released water from those 2 reservoirs, and those 2 reservoirs protect downtown from flooding. The waters are continuing to rise, and so the concern is what happens if those dams break? What happens if the water goes over the reservoirs? Downtown could really be in danger, Rena.
And we know the levee that you mentioned, that it's breached, and earlier in South Houston. Do we expect more damage? What are people saying about this? I mean, this is pretty significant, the fact that this water could be gushing into neighborhoods.
That is a major concern, and they don't know where the water is going to go at this point. This, of course, is on top of what we've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 days now, neighborhoods completely submerged in water. And the concern is what neighborhood's going to get flooded next? What's going to happen next? There are neighborhoods surrounding those reservoirs, and people are predicting that once they start to release that water, and when they continue to release that water, those neighborhoods are going to go under. There are 9,000, at last check, 9,100 people inside this convention center right now, and people are continuing to pour in. They are well beyond capacity. They originally intended for 5,000 people to be in there, so people are lining the hallways with basically just the clothes on their backs. There are children on the floor, elderly folks, animals from rabbits to dogs and cats, and it goes on and on and on, Rena.
It's so devastating to hear. We're looking at the images of the people in line at these shelters. We know thousands of people, Kenneth, have been turned away from shelters. What can you tell us about these evacuees? Where are they going to put them? Where will they find the area to live?
Well, I can tell you the good news is that they're not turning them away from the convention center, even though they are beyond capacity. They're still accepting people. There is the line outside, and they are still checking people in, and they're figuring out what they're going to do with them. City officials did say earlier this morning that they are identifying or in the process of identifying other mega shelters to open for people to relieve some of the what's going on inside this one. They haven't said where those shelters are going to be, but they said they are working on it. We should have some sort of announcement this afternoon.
Yeah, we do know that mega pastor Joel Osteen has announced they're opening their church doors as well after some criticism for not opening it up. I want to thank you, Kenneth Craig, for joining us in Houston. I want to turn now to Corpus Christi, where President Trump was just speaking. We go now to our Jamie Yukas, who was there on the ground. Jamie, can you tell us what he said?
Well, I can tell you that here in Corpus Christi, Texas, he met with FEMA, he met with the Red Cross, he gave an overall speech about how relief efforts are going in Texas itself. He came here to Corpus Christi to not be a distraction to everything happening in Houston. But I can tell you, actually, sorry, I was going to go to the firehouse because he just spoke there a short time ago. But this is what's happening. A crowd of several hundred people just showed up. They just watched the president come outside. He just went back in moments before you guys came to me. Can I talk to you guys really quick? What did you just see? Oh, you don't want to be on camera. What did you just see happen?
Oh, well, I just saw President Donald Trump come out and address the crowd.
You weren't able to hear him?
No, I wasn't able to hear, but we were able to see him. And it was awesome.
Why did you come today?
Well, because I'm a Trump supporter. Big-time Trump supporter.
What was it like to see him just right over there?
Oh, it was just exuberant. Really exciting.
The crowd seems very excited to have the president.
Very exciting. We have a lot of conservatives in our area.
All right. Thank you so much. I do want to tell you that the Secret Service came over. They started wanding people in the front row. So there was a little bit of chatter that he may come over and start shaking hands with people in the crowd. I think you guys are playing video right now of when he came out. The First Lady also came out and started waving to the crowd. The crowd then went very, very wild for that particular moment. I can tell you that people here were excited to see him at the end of his speech, which we could not hear. I don't know if that it was going out on a White House pool feed is what it's called. So the White House reporters may have that we could take a look at a little bit later. But out here in the crowd, we could not hear what he was saying. At the end of it, though, he held up a Texas flag. And the interesting part of that is, of course, the crowd went very wild for it. But moments before he came out, this is when we got an indication that he may come to the crowd, is that Secret Service started wanding people out here and then asked for a Texas flag. Someone in the crowd had it, brought it over to him, and then he waved it up on the podium. So people here excited that they had the flag. They don't know if they're going to get their flag back. I just heard that they're happy for him to keep it, is what they're saying to me right now. We have a number of people with flags who are walking up and down now, U.S. flags and Trump flags. The other interesting thing about him being here is that this is where Hurricane Harvey, about 30 minutes from here, made landfall as a Cat 4 hurricane. Just 30 minutes from here, complete devastation. Right here in Corpus Christi, you can see we have sunshine and things are relatively okay. Power is back. There's food. You can get gas here. If you go just 30 minutes away to Rockport, that city, we're told, may not have electricity for 6 weeks. So he doesn't want to be a distraction, but they may have him stop along the way or see some of this devastation firsthand. Once he leaves here, Rena, he will be going to Austin, Texas to get a state view of what's happening. And of course, the worst of it happening right now in Houston.
All right, Jamie, I want to thank you. We were wondering exactly what impact the president might have in that area, and to see these people excited, clearly his base, very happy to be there. Fascinating detail about the flag there as well, that he had asked to raise that Texas flag. Jamie Yukas, thank you very much for that report. Well, officials in Texas say that thousands are being rescued from devastating floods brought on by Harvey. More rainfall is expected to hit Houston and surrounding areas. The catastrophic flooding is pushing people out of their homes, leaving thousands flocking to overflowing shelters. Anthony Tornetta with the American Red Cross joins us now by phone from Washington. Anthony, what does your operation in Texas look like right now?
Yeah, let me be very clear. This is truly is a catastrophic storm, and so one of the things that we do as an organization is stress preparation. And so we have taken steps ahead of the storm to be as prepared as possible, but, you never really can be fully prepared. And so it's we have, for example, we had a shelter, an area at the convention center, and we had ended up with almost, between 8,000 and 10,000 people show up, and so that's a lot. And so we're working to move many of those to an alternative shelter. And so we were just trying to make sure that the people that have been impacted are in a safe place, and do everything we can for the people, not only of Houston, but of Texas, that have been impacted by this historic storm.
The Red Cross is used to and has a well-oiled machine about helping folks in disaster relief. But what type of assistance are you providing exactly right now?
Yeah, so right now our primary focus is going to be on sheltering and feeding the people that have been displaced. A lot of people have been walking in cold water, have been, transported through the water, and we want to make sure we get them dried off. We want to make sure that we get them wrapped in a warm blanket, so to speak, a Red Cross blanket, and make sure that we get them something to eat and a safe place to stay, get out of the weather. And so that's first and foremost. That's our priority. This is not, obviously, as massive as this storm is, this is not going to be the water's not going to recede tomorrow, right? So this is going to be a long process. It's going to be a long process just till we get out of the full weather picture, and then we move forward with recovery efforts.
Anthony, can you tell us right now how many people are in shelters right now? Are they at capacity? And do you believe that you will have the space for all of these evacuees, especially as the rains are continuing?
Yes. So the American Red Cross, look, last night we saw at least 17,000 residents stay in over 45 shelters across the Houston area and Texas, all the way out to Dallas. And even into Louisiana. So we are taking every step we can to make sure that people are safe. We have the ability to provide about 40,000 safety. 40,000 people that have been impacted can stay at our shelters. And to be honest with you, again, I come back to this is not a fast recovery. And so as we evaluate each day, each morning, our teams are in meetings at 5 a.m. each morning. And so we're evaluating what's going on. If we need to open more shelters, we'll do just that.
Have you had to turn away, Tony, people at these shelters?
No, we're not going to turn anybody away.
So there has been at no point anybody turned away, according to the Red Cross, at any of these shelters?
The Red Cross is not going to turn away somebody that shows up to the shelter and needs a safe place to stay.
So within the area of Houston, do you have enough cots for these folks? I mean, where are they sleeping? Where are you stretched right now is what I'm trying to sense.
So obviously, there's a significant amount of people that have been forced into sheltering situations. And so if we need to get more cots, which I believe that we do, we're actively working with city officials to safely move resources to where they need to go. The unfortunate reality about the situation is that we can't just put 50, 100, 1,000 cots in the back of a truck and say, go down the road. We need to work with city officials to do this safely, because the last thing we want to do is put anybody else in harm's way.
So when you talk about these cots and finding housing for these folks, where are you reevaluating and where are you reworking resources that are needed the most?
Yeah, so we're going to work with city officials across the state of Texas. For example, we have shelters set up. We're setting up another mega shelter in Houston, but we're also working with city officials in San Antonio and Austin, all the way out to Dallas, Texas, and making sure that we have an ability to get people to safe areas that are dry and provide them with some sort of normalcy in a really unnormal situation.
But with these water levels rising, are you able to transport the evacuees who need shelter to these other cities like San Antonio and Houston? How do you get them there?
Yeah, the Red Cross, we're not a primary source we're not transporting the people. We're working with local city officials to make sure that the transportation takes place. So we'll make sure that they're cared for before they get into their transportation vehicles, and we'll make sure that we're there for them afterwards.
Anthony Tornetta, I want to thank you so much. We know there's so many people without homes right now and did not expect a week ago they would be in this situation. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
I want to bring in Vernon Loeb, managing editor at the Houston Chronicle, who's on the phone and joins us now. Vernon, I started my career, actually, and sat next to you when you were covering the Iraq War, covering Donald Rumsfeld. And it's pretty magnificent to watch the coverage, just how much you guys have been doing with limited resources down there. How is the Houston area dealing with this catastrophe and this flooding? What are you seeing?
Well, the story is sort of shifting today from sort of the center core of Houston out into the outlying areas as the rain sort of begins to stop, but the rivers, the bayous, and the tributaries leading into the city all now start to crest and overflow their banks and threaten out, suburban communities and subdivisions. In Fort Bend County, they've evacuated 65, high-end subdivisions, fearing that the Brazos River is going to come over the levees at sort of, 1 in 800-year levels. So, we don't really know where today is going yet, but it could start to abate, or it could become the worst moment of the crisis.
Do you think that officials did enough to prepare for this?
I do. I think you really had to have been here to just experience how much water is on the ground and has fallen on Houston to know that there's no government program, no zoning, no flood control regulations that could have stopped or even mitigated this very much. This is just, truly millennial. One of the National Weather Service meteorologists called it epic. And I just don't think there's anything anybody really could have done to certainly to have stopped this or to have made people's ability to cope with it any better.
We're hearing the word biblical. We're also hearing that a Houston police officer drowned in Harvey floodwaters. Do you know anything more about that?
I don't. I just know that has happened. They're working hard to notify the family. I think biblical is actually, quite frankly, the right word.
Yeah, it's no exaggeration from the reports we're hearing on the ground. There is such concern, Vernon, about the people without homes who are evacuees. What can you tell us about where those people are going? Is there enough room in the shelters?
I think there probably is, in that they're working to expand the shelters, sort of hour by hour. I think there are over 5,000 people in the George R. Brown Convention Center in downtown Houston. This is the big box where normally, like, the auto show is, and now it's full of refugees. Really looks like a kind of Katrina moment. But the Red Cross is here. Relief supplies are pouring in, and they're opening up shelters all over the place. So I think probably the greater issue is, have they rescued everybody, hole up on the second floor of their house? Have they found everybody out there in some of these neighborhoods that are completely submerged and gone? I think, to me, that's the more critical question for the moment. If you can get people out of there and they're alive, then shelter becomes something you could work toward a little bit more deliberately.
Vernon, there's immediate concern also about the levee that's been breached. What can you tell us about that, and how imminent is this situation with the levees?
Well, the levee has been breached in Brazoria County. The Brazos River has gone over a levee, so they've evacuated one subdivision. A really chilling email went out this morning that basically said, the levee's been breached, get out. The levees haven't yet been breached in Fort Bend County to the north of Brazoria, same river just to the north. It's not clear whether the Brazos in Fort Bend is going to get up over the levees or not. It's certainly a possibility. The models are suggesting that it might. Then there are the levees around the Barker and Addicks Reservoir, where water is coming over the levees. It's now being released on a planned basis, which means it's flowing down into the Buffalo Bayou through central Houston. That's really the critical part of the story today. How high will these rivers rise, and what kind of additional flooding will that cause? We're also seeing this to the northeast of Houston, out by Bush Airport. So there are these tributaries all over the region, sort of rimming Houston, that are all starting to come up to historic levels and starting to flood. So that's sort of where the story is going today.
All right, Vernon Loeb, we really appreciate your coverage and reading the Houston Chronicle. Thank you for joining us, Vernon.
Thank you.
And as we mentioned, those shelters in Texas, they're reaching their limits. Thousands have been displaced from their homes. But FEMA says that up to 30,000 people could ultimately need shelters. Overcrowding in shelters is a major concern, especially as more people seek refuge. The conditions are worsening. The rain keeps falling. And the facilities, some say, are taking matters into their own hands. They're opening up actually stores to evacuees. Jim McInvale is one of them. He's actually an owner of the Gallery Furniture in Houston. He joins me now by phone. Jim, you opened up your store as a makeshift shelter. What can you tell us about that? How many people have you brought in?
Well, we opened it up Sunday. We had done this in Hurricane Katrina for 200 New Orleans evacuees for a couple nights. So we opened it up Sunday on the North Freeway store, rescued about 200 people ourselves. 200 more drove to the store, and so we had 400 here Sunday night. And then we opened our Fort Bend store, which has been deluged by rain, as has Houston, but we opened the Fort Bend store. We have about 400 people there, too, plus 75 members of the National Guard, and they're telling me when they, if they have more problems over there, we may get up to 1,000 displaced people in that store.
So you're telling me you've housed 300 to 400 refugees and evacuees, and you're potentially going to house as much as 1,000?
Well, 300 to 400 each store right now, which is 700 or 800. We may house as many as 1,000 at the Fort Bend store.
And what do you find right now is your biggest concern when you're trying to provide shelter for these folks in a furniture store?
Well, it's easy because we got lots of mattresses, we got lots of food, and so as far as them sleeping, and we have restaurants at both stores, and the community's reaching out and bringing us all kinds of food. So the biggest thing is, giving these people hope of a better tomorrow and helping them. Somebody just delivered a whole bunch of clothes, and people going through the clothes. So the community outreach has been great. Our biggest problem is helping these people get back to some normality in their life, getting them back in their home, getting them back to work.
Yeah, you can't put a price tag on hope, and so many people just need it right about now. How do they deal with showers? How do they deal with bathrooms? These are things you don't think about when you're evacuating your home.
Yeah, we have 4 showers here at the North Freeway store, so that's pretty easy. It takes all day for people to cycle through the showers, but we get that done. And we're bringing in 6 portable showers to the other store in Grand Parkway, which is out in Fort Bend County. So we're getting that done, too.
FEMA says up to 30,000 people may be displaced in Texas when the storm is completely done and over with. Do you feel that the officials have done enough to help your community?
I can't criticize anybody. Who would have thought this event of historic biblical proportions would have get this bad? Employees that work for me that are finally being able to get out of their house and come to work city have never seen flooding in many areas of the city and the county as bad as they see it now. I, for one, thought the storm was over on Saturday, so what do I know? And so I can't criticize what they've done, but everybody's rallying together to try to help the people and get through this. My daughter has a saying, if not for my struggle, I would not have known my strength, so we're battling through it.
That is a great saying, and you're right about hope. So many people just looking for hope right about now. I want to thank you, Jim McInvale, and for what you've done for the community. Thank you for joining us.
We're staying the course. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Well, one shelter that's over capacity right now is actually the Convention Center in Houston. And CBS This Morning co-anchor Nora O'Donnell got an up-close look at that situation.
We were here just 48 hours ago, and there were only 700 people. Now there's more than 9,000 people, according to the Red Cross. As you can see, people are sleeping on the ground. There are not enough beds for everybody. When we were here, they had 1,200 beds. They're trying to get 5,000 cots, they say. That means about half of the people don't have beds. That's why they're sleeping on the floor. It's important to see what's going on.
Well, the Houston Convention Center, it normally houses about 5,000 people and is about 4,000 people over capacity right now. Well, the rain continues to come down in parts of southeast Texas, but will it eventually lift up? Meteorologist Jeff Jameson from our Dallas station, KTVT, is tracking the storm.
Heavy rain will continue across parts of southeast Texas thanks to Tropical Storm Harvey. The heaviest rain today will be along and east of I-45, so the eastern parts of Houston and over toward Beaumont, Port Arthur. There is some drier air that's trying to work into the storm. You see that brown color, that's a drier air. So western parts of Houston will not be quite as wet today, but the rain is still falling. And we've already in southeast Houston set the all-time record for rainfall from a tropical system in the United States. 49 inches of rain, and it's still raining, obviously, for today. The tropical storm will continue to move northeast and make landfall Wednesday morning in southwest Louisiana and continue to move northward through Louisiana and into the mid-Tennessee Valley by the weekend. The rain should begin to taper off a bit in the Houston area as we make our way into tonight and tomorrow. You see here on the forecast for 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the heaviest rain in far east Texas, the rain tapering off in Houston. And as this storm system continues to move north, the heavy rain will go north with it, and the rain will end altogether. But there's still a lot of river flooding in Houston. A lot of the creeks and bayous have still not crested and won't do so until this weekend. Rena?
Thank you so much. And switching gears to our other top story of the day as well. President Trump has a very clear message for North Korea after the regime launched a missile yesterday. The president says, and I'm quoting here, all options are on the table. The president issued a statement condemning Pyongyang, saying that its actions only increase its isolation in the region. Our Mola Lenghi has the latest.
President Trump was non-committal when asked about North Korea's latest missile launch prior to leaving for Texas. But he was more forceful in a statement released earlier this morning, saying the launch showed North Korea's contempt for its neighbors and that all options are on the table for the U.S. to respond. Sirens wailed throughout Japan, warning people to take shelter as the missile flew right over the country. The intermediate-range ballistic missile traveled 1,600 miles over the island of Hokkaido before splashing down into the Pacific Ocean. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the launch a reckless act and an unprecedented threat. He spoke with President Trump on the phone. The U.S., Japan, and South Korea called for an immediate meeting of the UN Security Council to address this latest launch.
It's unacceptable. They have violated every single UN Security Council resolution that we've had, and so I think something serious has to happen.
North Korea's ambassador to the UN in Switzerland said this morning that the launches are needed to keep their country safe from America.
DPRK will continue to strengthen its defense capability with nuclear force as a pivot, as long as the U.S. maintains nuclear threats and do not stop military drills at the doorstep of DPRK.
The U.S. and South Korea conduct annual military exercises, which the North views as preparation for an invasion. Mola Lenghi, CBS News, the White House.
For more on North Korea, I want to bring in DJ Peterson, the president of Longview Global Advisors. He's also a former director with Eurasia and RAND Corporation. DJ, what do you think the main purpose was for North Korea launching a missile that was directly over Japan, especially after backing off its threat to attack Guam?
I think it was an attempt to show that they could strike Guam, to show that they have the potential to send a rocket that far. That had to shoot it over Japan, in part because shooting it towards Guam would have made it fly over South Korean territory, and that would have been even more provocative at this time.
So we mentioned that President Trump's response to this new test, warning North Korea all options are on the table. What are the administration's options right now?
It's everything from continuing their current military exercises that they're conducting with South Korea. It's working very closely with Beijing to get the Chinese to put more pressure on Pyongyang. It's working through the United Nations. Of course, all options means military options, and what that would be is not clear. You have these broad statements coming out of the White House, but it's not clear from an execution perspective what that means.
Do you think that when you talk about covert operations, do you think that there's anything that this administration is doing covertly to prevent their advancement with these missiles?
I'm sure they are. It's been clear that the United States have tried covert operations in the past, and I'm sure they will. Whether they go to overt operations, though, is a big question, and that would be very provocative from Pyongyang's perspective.
Do you see that as a potential option with this administration?
They've said it's an option. You have different messages coming out of the White House and out of the government and the military, and so it's really difficult to interpret what is going on in Washington right now. And I think that creates the biggest problem, is that you have uncertainty on the U.S. side, which is unprecedented.
Do you think that a denuclearized Korean peninsula is really a realistic option?
I don't think it's realistic. The cat is out of the bag. Pyongyang has nuclear weapons. They are not going to get rid of them. they give the regime legitimacy. They're on TV right now because they have nuclear weapons and they're threatening. So this is the raison d'etre. This is what Pyongyang wants, and so they're not going to give up nuclear weapons. So the idea of denuclearizing the peninsula, I think, is a past objective.
The president said from the beginning putting pressure on China is important in this equation with North Korea. Do you think that's the right strategy, and will that help?
Well, that's Beijing is the only government that Pyongyang really listens to. And so I think
of course,
strategy
when it comes
focused on
from studio
Beijing
number 8,
to work their diplomatic channels is the right way to go. Beijing wants North Korea to stop the missile testing, and I think that is the focus right now. That should be the focus of Washington, and that's where the U.S. and China.
So we monitor the situation right about this time, and hopefully it not going to affect us too much. So now that the situation right now na Houston, Texas. So one for tell all man plenty. Thank you for one of the follow with we. You know, we say within so we get one bridge where they a little far away from. We know they too close. That bridge the water don't flow. It don't flow over, and they say it get for flood more. So we monitor that one day for see if it not go affect you too much or if it affect you. But right now with studio we get plenty gadgets then I have plenty equipment, plenty materials. Then if any flooding happen, it go affect you big time. But that not go stop you from bringing you broadcast. You know, it go just make you go lost a lot of stuff. So, but for now. One for tell we are all plenty thank you, and of course the president Mr. Donald Trump visit Texas na Corpus Christi, and it says Saturday back in the Kana Houston, and of course evacuations they go on different parts of the city, so things are happening. So just want for say thank you to una all right, and so we'll get for end the broadcast for today. Thank you very much. Once more, this now Sherrick's Broadcast Network. And of course, we come to now live from studio number 8. And of course, we are very happy for everything we want to continue for do. So, thank you.